Hi everyone, this is another episode of our Indisputable Proofs of Creation, and we're going to look at the four forces of nature, or four forces of nature, and we've already learned about gravity, and bear in mind there are three more forces in the universe to consider, the electromagnetic force, and the strong and weak forces. So that comes to four: gravity, electromagnetic force, and the strong force, and the weak force. Okay, and James Trefil in his book, The Moment of Creation, 1983, at page 75, tells us the four forces have certain attributes, and I'm going to show that to you in the next slide. Okay, so these are the charts of the relative strengths of the four forces and their ranges. So gravity is 6 to the times 10 to the 39th power, and it has an infinite range, goes to the edge of the universe and beyond, actually, theoretically. The weak force is much different, 10 to the 5th strength of power, and range is just a little bit beyond that, 10 to the 15th power. Electromagnetic force is measured somewhat differently, apparently. It's 1 over 137, infinite in scope. And a strong force has strength equal to 1, solid 1, and its range is 10 to the 13th power. So whatever it is, you don't have to know what these mean. The scientists are going to tell you the relative significance so that you can grasp why we're even talking about these four forces. First, in that regard, we have Michael Papagiannis in his article, Could You Build a Better Universe? In the Griffith Observer, 1974, volume 38, I think that's number 8 at pages 2 to 11, discusses the four fundamental forces and their relative strengths. As you can see, they vary tremendously. You have an extremely potent, strong nuclear force down to the very feeble gravitational force, some 1,040 times less in intensity. Papagiannis points out that these ratios are actually quite critical for the existence of any life anywhere in the universe. If the ratio of strong to gravitational force was 1041 instead of 1040, planets would not be able to retain their atmospheres. The difference is utterly slight because it would be a change of just adding 1 zero at the end of 40 zeros, an extremely narrow alteration. Hence, Earth is among the planets that depend on the most delicate fine-tuning of the force of gravity to the strong force. The slightest alteration in these two immaterial formulas floating as laws in the cosmos, and the Earth would have no atmosphere. The precisely identical balance applies between gravity and a different force, the electromagnetic force. They are tuned to a relationship where electromagnetism is 10 to the 40th power stronger than gravity. If electromagnetism were increased or gravity decreased in relative intensity just by 1 zero, a very minor change, John P. Cox and R. Thomas Julie in their book Principles in Stellar Structure, Volume 2, Application to Stars, New York, Gordon Beach, 1968 at 944 to 1028 explained life would not be possible anywhere in the universe because only small stars would form. So we're talking about a very small turn of a dial to make the difference between relative to these two forces, and you wouldn't have any small stars, and you can't have life without small stars. Please note that in just these two examples, the gravitational force is precisely balanced to being 10 to the 40th times less powerful than the electromagnetic force and the strong force. Yet these two forces are very disparate from the other, so recall the force of gravity is extremely slight. It's 0. And I think that's 9 zeros, could be wrong, but I think so, 6673 cubic centimeters per gram per second. And if it was altered ever so slightly higher or lower in potency, sufficient to change the relationship to the strong force or the electromagnetism by 0.0, and that looks like about 30 zeros to me, 1, then life could never exist on Earth anywhere. So we're talking about very small modifications at all to the setting these have, like just a small notch on thousands and billions of options, and it won't work. Life can't exist. So that's the importance between strong force and electromagnetism. So what explains the origin of fine-tuning of the immaterial forces known as gravity, by which all our lives, our very existence, depends on whether gravity's pull has an interrelationship with other forces measured as a fraction of either 40 zeros or 41 zeros? Is this chance or design? 1 part in 10 to the 40th power is equivalent to a blindfolded person rummaging through a trillion piles of dimes the size of North America containing just one red dime that reached to the moon and picking out on the first try the one red dime. That's Dr. U. Ross, astrophysicist, creator in the cosmos. What he's saying is the probability this would ever happen by chance is inconceivable. For all practical purposes, there's only one option. It had to be planned this way. Somebody is setting a dial in a certain way, and it's very obvious. Paul Davies, chair of the theoretical physics at Newcastle upon the Tyre, admitted in 1995 that although he is not a religious man, quote, yesterday's theologians would have been delighted with today's discovery of just how delicately balanced that cosmic order turns out to be. This is Davies in his article, The Great Conundrum in the Sky, The Guardian, London, September 2nd, 1982 at 17. Robert Jastrow, founder and director of NASA's Goddard Space Studies for 20 years, presently, or time I drafted this, was the director of the Mount Wilson Institute that manages the Mount Wilson Observatory and former professor of astronomy at Columbia and Dartmouth, explains what these facts mean. Yes, there is another aspect of modern astronomical discoveries that is, in my view, as remarkable as the evidence for the abrupt birth of the universe. So what we've been studying, by the way, is the anthropic principle, the evidence of the anthropic principle, which is we see concurrently all fields of science are showing there's a providential nature to the way the things have been set up. And I'll tell you what the answer is from the people who don't want to ascribe anything to God about it. It's what would you? The answer is what would you expect to happen if we exist? It would look like we were designed to be here, but it's just chance out of but they don't realize the very predicate of the evidence is there's only been one chance. There is no basis to think there's ever been multiple chances, and we're just like one of a trillion efforts to make a universe. This had a finite time, and there's no basis to believe there's any existence of time beyond this universe. So in other words, you're confined to this one shot, and it has to work or fail, and it's all set to the dials to work as far as we can possibly know from our time barrier inside this universe. Okay, so let's continue with this remark. According to the picture of the evolution of the universe developed by astronomers and his fellow scientists, the smallest change in any of the circumstances of the natural world, such as the relative strengths of the forces of nature, we just reviewed 4, or the properties of elementary particles, which is a whole other field, would have led to a universe in which there could be no life and no man. Jastrow, in his article called The Astronomer and God, the Intellectuals Speak Out About God, is the name of the book. R. Vigezi, 1984, at 15 and 21. Okay, so how can we conceptualize what they're saying? Is imagine I went online, I said I searched for images of dials, and I got all these washer dryer dials and some thermostats, I think. So this is not a bad example because see, I've labeled the one on the left strong force, in the middle is G, which is gravity, below that is electromagnetic force, and then there's the weak force. And the principle that they're finding out is these settings. So I put a little arrow on the strong force there towards 40 on the right, and similarly on the electromagnetic force, I put an arrow in there, did another arrow on the weak force, and in the thermostat was set to 40 degrees apparently, so that's fine. So the precision, think about how many hundreds and possible options you have on these dials if you weren't confined to the preset manufacturers. What if it was just simply how many lines fit in here? So there'd be like 1,000 possible notches on each one of these. Then imagine that you multiply that into the millions or billions of notches, and now you can start to understand to just change, from one small notch to the other is enough to throw off the whole universe, that there would be no life. There would be no small stars. There would be not enough gas of a certain type. So all of these factors are not random. If anything, that's the whole point, is they're completely non-random settings. They are set there with one objective in mind. And what is that? Not to create life, but to make a life possible. And that's the other thing. This isn't a evolutionary predicate. This is the predicate to a lot. If life comes into existence, this universe is perfectly set up to accept it and to take care of it, and not to to providentially, that's the best word you can think, providentially take care of what is life if it ever came into existence. This takes care of life. It doesn't make life happen. It makes it possible that life could even exist. If you don't have atmosphere, you don't have life. Okay, just as an example. So you have to have gravity to have atmosphere. Just one example. And that's a single setting. You just have to have that to at least have a gravity. But the four factors working together don't create life. They make life possible. And that's the interesting thing. And so it's called the anthropic principle, meaning there seems to be a design. Seems to is how others would say it, but I would say it's an actual design. There is an actual design to set up a universe that takes into mind all these factors and sets them perfectly so they are in balance to make life possible. Okay, and just a couple more slides I want to go over, and then we'll be done with this episode. Is scientist George Greenstein, who is committed to natural explanations, likewise confesses in the Symbiotic Universe, William Morrow, 1988, at pages 26 to 27. As we survey all the evidence, the thought incessantly arises that some supernatural agency, or rather agency, capital A, must be involved. Is it possible that suddenly, without intending to, we have stumbled upon scientific proof of the existence of a supreme being? Was it God who stepped in and so providentially crafted the cosmos for our benefit? So when you hear scientists, people of great respect and renown in their field, and Greenstein is one of those, by the way, saying out openly that this evidence that emerged at this period of time in history, and by the way, it's only gotten much, much greater. I mean, this time it started with the hydrogen in 1956 with Hoyle. One factor he found that you can't live without, and it's going down and dissipating, and that's also proves the Big Bang is necessary, and so on. And then you have, 1, 2, gravity, and then you have now 4 factors, and so on. They're growing, and these alone are enough to make people think it's wonderful to contemplate the providence of creation. But now we're well up towards in the 90 factors that have to coexist and be set just precisely right for all kinds of different things, so that make life possible through the whole universe. So this is beyond doubt a set These are set parameters intentionally set to make life possible, not make it happen, but to make life possible. So this universe was created with the intent that life would live in it. And as he says, without intending to do so. And that's always the best way that evidence exists for something. And this is what God did. He forced a confession out of these scientists that there is something going on here that does not fit their scientific model of everything happens by some sort of happenstance, or a scientific cause that doesn't involve any intelligence. And just throw out of your mind that some judge in some place in the middle of Pennsylvania said intelligent design cannot be taught. I don't think this judge understands where science had progressed by the point in time. And it may have been the fault of the advocates. Maybe they didn't have this kind of evidence. I don't know what they put on. Or I think what they did is they just tried to bring it all to one little thing, as the flagellum of a bacteria. And they made it all about that. And this didn't even get discussed. This puts it all beyond doubt. So that's exactly what happened. Now remember, Behe was put on there, and then it was a hypothetical discussion that maybe the flagella motor for bacteria came from a predecessor, and that's all they needed to say. See, it could have evolved. Instead of what Behe was saying, it looks like it's created sua generis, meaning God just miraculously made this flagella motor with all the parts that we have in a car rotary engine. And so that's why that's why the case was lost, is they ended up getting, at that time there was just one paper out there that said it could be that the flagellum motor had a predecessor, and it might have served a different function. And that's all you need. If you can speculate in evolution, you can turn something that's probably not evolutionary, something that looks created. You can just as long as there's a reasonable speculation that it could be possible, it's enough to kill the idea. But what didn't get litigated is, what about this evidence? This has none of that kind of speculation that affects and is acceptable evidence in evolution. Evolution will accept any kind of speculation of an ancestor of anything. And so you will never, it's an irrefutable system because there's no hard evidence. When you get into hard sciences like astronomy, there's no escaping it. Now you can still speculate, but it's not acceptable. So the multiverse and other speculations, for example, are not taken seriously because there's no way of proving them or disproving them. And they never will be. So that will not be accepted as science within the realm of the hard sciences. Evolution, unfortunately, it could have been a hard science if it were rigorous and decided not to be engaging in just so stories. But here we don't have just so stories. This is hard science, and it's just numbers that prove the facts. So I think we've got one or two more slides. All right, physicist Paul Davies, we've seen him before. In his article, Physics and the Mind of God, First Things, August/September 1995 at 3134 says, if we could twiddle a knob and change the existing laws, even very slightly, the chances are that the universe as we know it would fall apart, descending into chaos. Exactly what I've been telling you. Certainly, life as we know it, and even of less elaborate systems such as stable stars, would be threatened by just the tiniest change in the strengths of the fundamental forces. The laws that characterize our actual universe, as opposed to an infinite number of alternate possible universes, seem almost contrived, fine-tuned, some commentators have claimed, so that life and consciousness may emerge. So it may emerge, doesn't make it emerge, but it may emerge and survive. If it exists somehow, emerges, it will be protected by these forces. I cannot prove to you that this is design, but whatever it is, it's certainly very clever. Actually, I think that's a very clever conclusion. He's telling you it's design without telling you. Something that's clever can't be an accident. So he's being ironic. Okay, so let's see. I think I have one more slide. Okay, now if you've enjoyed this video, so I have no more slides. If you've enjoyed this video, I would appreciate it if you would recommend this to a friend or a family member or someone who would like to challenge some scientific claims that are being made here. And because this is hard science we're looking at. We're not looking at evolutionary science that accepts speculation as if it's scientific. And we are trying to show you there is unquestionable, irrefutable proof of design, intelligent design, of the highest order, of the highest magnitude, of objectively hard science can see it and admits it in this realm, in these realms, and even in the realm of if you look behind the lines of the episode we gave you about the solar system, and it can hold together, but you know, with more than four or more planets, it's going to all fall apart. What's keeping it together? They're definitely on the edge of, like, there's no other explanation now other than some sort of factor that's taking care of us providentially. Okay, anyway, I hope this helped everybody, and please, as I said, if you don't mind, pass it on so that somebody else could learn about these kind of facts. And thank you for watching, and God bless. Take care. Ciao. Bye.